Ayubowan, Vanakkam. I'm Vayoni Dimel. This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views and entertainment from Boston and USA. Frederica Jansz became the editor of the Sunday Leader following the assassination of editor-in-chief Lasantha Wickrematunge in January 2009. For Fredrica, it was colorful and controversial few years as the editor of the Sunday Leader, and in September 2012, when a new management took over, she was asked to leave the post of editor. At present, Frederica is in the USA. Frederica Jansz joins with us from Seattle, USA. Frederica, you came to USA, I think, last year in October. You have sought political asylum in USA. Now, there are many journalists who had to leave Sri Lanka to seek refuge in foreign countries. Why?
Sri Lanka is one of the worst places to practice journalism. And that is not my opinion only. That in fact has been rated by international news watchdogs like Reporters Without Borders, etc. have rated it as one of the worst countries or the most unsafe countries in the world to practice journalism. And that is a primary reason why many journalists have had to flee the country. Many journalists like myself. Before me, those who did not leave or who were not lucky enough to get out in time have paid with their lives, like my predecessor did, Lasantha Wickrematunge. There were others who did get out alive, but not without first having suffered serious injury or having been seriously assaulted. Like Keith Noel, for example, the former deputy editor or consultant editor for the Nation newspaper before it was bought over by the government. And like Keith, there were others. Similarly to Lasantha, there were others who were murdered, like Sivaram, for example, who was another journalistic colleague of mine and who I knew for many years. And many more before him. There was after him. And then, like myself, there were journalists who continue to get threatened and intimidated, harassed. And yes, they had to leave. So these are the reasons why many journalists have fled Sri Lanka. I can certainly speak for myself and my reasons for having left. But certainly, these are some of the reasons why all of us, those of us who made that decision to leave, left.
So in your view, if you haven't left Sri Lanka, your life would have been in danger?
Well, I believe so, yes. For years, I have been the victim of death threats. I have had numerous death threats over the years. Death threats which accumulated after I took over as editor of the Sunday Leader. Apart from that, I was harassed by politically motivated court cases. I was intimidated, or rather, attempts to intimidate. And then last year, I was removed from my post as editor. It was a removal that did not come because I had failed in my job as editor at professional level. That removal came, it was politically motivated. It came at the orders of the highest in the land when the paper was taken over again by someone who was a political stooge or was used by the government to buy over the newspaper. And one of the first orders he was given, it was on the condition that he got rid of me, which he did do. And it did not stop with that. Even after my removal, I was continuing to be hauled up before the courts. I was warned that despite the newspaper having published apologies for articles that I had carried against the Defense Secretary, that he intended to pursue with further litigation against me in my private capacity. I then no longer had the protection or the cover of the newspaper or of my post as editor. I was also told by lawyers that by my lawyers that there may be moves to impound my passport, that was a very great possibility, that I was definitely looking at a jail term somewhere down the line in the near future. But even that is not really what compelled me to leave. It was that even after I was removed from the newspaper, at least on 2 occasions, if not more, I was followed home by unidentified men on motorbikes. And I also received a threatening phone call. So, you know, as I've said before, I'm a mother and I have young children, and I decided that it was time that I made a decision, however hard it was, to leave and live and survive for my children. They needed a mother.
Some critics say that journalists who leave Sri Lanka exaggerate their stories while in foreign countries to get political asylum. Have you heard about that allegation?
I certainly cannot speak for others, but I can only speak for myself. In my case, I believe my case is well documented. Even before I came to the US. I mean, the instances or incidents of harassment and intimidation against me, including the death threats, have all been well documented. That said, after I came here, I don't need to go public. I don't need to make public my cause in order for me to, in order for it to strengthen my case for asylum in the US. I am saying that because the process for my asylum or for me to remain in the US, the process has already been concluded. So I stand nothing to gain by going public now. Absolutely nothing. Because at an official level with US immigration, the process is over.
Is it fair to say that you were let down by many of your colleagues in the Sunday Leader newspaper when the new management took action to remove you as the editor?
Well, yes and no. I had colleagues who stood by me. I had actually young journalists who resigned when I was asked to leave. But you see, for me, that is not what signifies standing by. I really didn't want anybody to resign because I certainly could not find a job for anyone else. It was bad enough that I had to, again restart start from scratch all over again, or look for alternative work, or in my case, I couldn't promise work to anybody else. Now, but that apart, yes, I was let down in many ways by colleagues who professed to be friends. And apparently it was because they had been told or made to believe that I had received a huge payoff by the new management, that I accepted a huge financial payoff in order to walk out of that newspaper, which is an absolute lie. It is an absolute lie. All I was paid was my compensation, which was included in my contract. It was part of my contractual terms and conditions. And that was all that the new management paid me. And they did that because they had to honor my contract. And I was not paid 1 cent more than that. So there was no payoff. And I would never have left if not that I was forced to do so. I mean, the new management appointed a new editor even as I sat in that office. I had not resigned. I had not said I was leaving. They had already chosen a new editor, and she reported to work while I was still functioning at the office as editor.
Lasantha Wickrematunge was one of the fearless journalists we ever had in Sri Lanka. Do you think under the present leadership and with the new editor, Sunday Leader is still representing the vision of Lasantha?
Not at all. Not at all. With the sale, Lasantha's legacy was killed forever, unless it can ever be revived again. I don't know, but certainly not under this management and the current editor. No, definitely not. So in many ways, Lasantha's death was in vain.
Now let's talk about the white flag story. Some say that with that story, you broke exclusively, you helped the present Sri Lankan leadership, and that in a way ruined the political momentum of General Sarath Fonseca. Do you see it that way?
You know, as a journalist, I only stood by what I had been told. There was no other alternative for me other than to lie, and that I was not going to do. Sarath Fonseca did say what he said to me in December of 2009. And we ran that story on December 13th of 2009. He not only said that to me on the day the story was published, he reiterated the same to the BBC on that same Sunday after the story had come out in the Sunday Leader. At a press conference that evening, he reiterated the same to the BBC, and Charles Haviland, in fact, carried a news story saying as much. And that was published by the BBC. But as I said, that apart, so when the government took him to court on that, I had to stand by what he had told me. He did say that to me. I mean, if I had said that he did not when he did, I would have been lying. And I was not going to lie as a journalist. I have never lied as a journalist. And I know many people are saying here that, I don't know, that I put him in jail, which is another total falsehood. The man was already in jail at the time he was tried for this. But apart from all that, the debate of all that, the fact is, he said it to me. At the time he said it to me, it was 7 months after the conclusion of the war. This was the former army chief saying that the current defense secretary had committed a serious war crime. And I figured that he had plenty of time to check the veracity of that claim out in the 7 months before he said it to me as army chief, despite the fact that it had been related to him by a third party. But apart from that argument too, the fact is he said it to me and I merely stood by my story. That is all.
There was a media report about a statement made by Defense Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa about you. According to the Defense Secretary, most Sri Lankans hate the Sunday Leader newspaper while you were the editor. Is that a fair assessment about the popularity of Sunday Leader under your leadership and about your integrity as a journalist?
This is the same Defense Secretary who walked around telling anybody who would listen that everyone hated the Sunday Leader when Lasantha Wickrematunge was editor. And that they hated Lasantha Wickrematunge too. He then reiterated the same about me. So, as far as I am concerned, I mean, the Defense Secretary has been known to say many things, including calling us, including myself, and journalists who work at the Sunday Leader as pigs who eat shit. This is the same Defense Secretary who's saying that we are hated and the newspaper is hated. So do you take this man seriously? I certainly don't. I take his threats seriously because the man is powerful enough to carry out on his threats, but on his opinion of journalists and publishing houses, I really don't take him seriously. I don't take what he thinks seriously.
Fredrica, as a journalist and as the editor of Sunday Leader, what are the most memorable and exciting work you have done?
As a journalist, from the time I began, I got thrown in covering the war. I was only 21 years old when I started out. And I almost immediately started the ethnic war. So for me, there are very memorable moments during that time, including reporting from the front line. during the heat of battle. I recall one instant in particular having to fly back from the battlefield in a helicopter with a wounded soldier who died, um, literally lying at our feet in that same chopper. And I can go on, from the time of interviewing, getting an exclusive interview at that time with Dr. Anton Balasingham to Thamel Chelvam, etc., etc., and many other instances. And then, of course, the Tilanga Sumatipala's case, covering that for 8 consecutive weeks or more with the Sunday Leader, during which time Tilanga Sumatipala was jailed. He was sacked from office as president of the Sri Lanka Cricket Board. Then he was jailed, and many more stories like that. And then, as editor of the lead, of course, the White Flags story, and many more. The Golden Key story. We exclusively broke the story and reported the number of members of the Golden Key, or and who had invested what. And in the 3 years that I was at the Sunday Leader, I have lost count. Of the number of exposes, the scandals, the investigative reports. There have been many, and a lot of them very memorable. A lot of them with some repercussions, some serious repercussions. It has certainly been a very colorful 25 years in journalism.
We know, in spite of some intimidation for the free media, there are many journalists who work fearlessly doing objective reporting. As a journalist who had so many experience, what do you have to say to those journalists, especially the young journalists who are in Sri Lanka?
They have no future. How can they? When you have publishers who are bending over backwards to appease a government that is corrupt and that has done nothing but stifle media freedom and freedom of expression, then what future is there for a young journalist who is trying to do his or her job with integrity? None whatsoever. Currently in Sri Lanka, there is absolutely no future for that kind of journalist.
Do you think the police will ever find the killers of Lasantha Wickrematunge?
Certainly not as long as this government is in power, no.
Now you're in Seattle, USA. Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to continue your work as a journalist?
Well, journalism has always been my passion, and it is something I will continue to pursue. I don't know. Since coming here, I have to admit that I have thought about this a lot and wondered perhaps if I should seek a career change, mainly because the price my family has had to pay for my career has been huge, and it has been too much. It's been too big a price. For those reasons, I have seriously thought of a career change. And in fact, I just might do that. In fact, I've just got an opening in interior design, which is another passion of mine, which I have long sought to study and pursue, which I never had the time to do in Sri Lanka. And since I have now got a break to actually work with an interior designer, I just might pursue that as a career. But whether I will ever give up my journalism, I doubt it, because like I said, for me journalism was always a vocation, and I am confident that I will continue to write and doing what I do best.
Fredrica, you have been a journalist for about 25 years, and that work also led you to where you are now. Looking back of your work as a journalist and as the editor of Sunday Leader, do you have any regrets?
If you had asked me this question last year, I would have said no. I have no regrets whatsoever. But a year later, I cannot answer that question so quickly. Again, I repeat, because of the terrific or terrible price that my family has had to pay. for the career that I chose. So, to answer your question, if I have any regrets, yes, I have made mistakes. I have made mistakes. And often think if I did something one way and not the other, whether I would have had to take this gigantic leap or this step that I had just taken, which I never wanted to take, but was forced to do so. I don't know. I don't know. All I can say is that I am human and I have made mistakes. I certainly don't think that any of those mistakes justified the political persecution that I suffered or that compelled me to leave my home country that I love so much. But that said, so there it is. Do I have regrets in any of the major decisions I took, as in being a journalist or when I accepted the post of editor of the Sunday Leader? Many people have asked me this question before, because at the time I had my own company and I was running my own magazine. No, I don't regret that decision. I did make the right decision. I did pay a huge price for making that decision, but I don't regret that decision. So, no.
That concludes our news edition. We meet you again with another news edition of News, Views and Entertainment from Boston and USA. Till then, goodbye.